not taken. Robert Frost wrote, "Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference." I was thinking about this quote a couple of days ago when I was thinking about some of the topics I wanted to address in these vlogs, because I think that a road indeed has made a great deal of difference for Round Rock, Texas, and the surrounding region. The difference, however, being that it is a road very heavily traveled by countless people. The road, of course, that I'm thinking of is I-35, which I mentioned in the previous video. To get an idea of why it was built and how it was built, or rather, why it was built where it was, and why it wasn't built elsewhere, as well as some of the effects that had on Round Rock and the surrounding communities, let's take a look at some maps. Alright, well, welcome back to Texas. So I thought we'd start looking at the state level, the route that I-35 takes. There are several major branches to I-35, but the one that I'm concerned with is the north-south branch that runs through north, central, and south Texas. So for those of you who haven't been to Texas or haven't perhaps experienced large highways like this, I thought that it would be a good idea to kind of get a street level view of what a highway like this actually looks like. So this is actually a fairly good place to start. This is probably as bad as it gets, some would say, because we're looking at the section of I-35 that is broken off into decks. So you have two upper decks on either side, plus lanes below on the ground that run underneath. So in Round Rock, the interstate is still substantial, for sure. You have 3 lanes of traffic on going in each direction, plus 2 to 3 lane feeder roads on either side. So it is a considerable amount of asphalt, that's for sure. We'll go ahead and drop down and get a street level view of this. This is actually just essentially entering Round Rock right here. Actually, a long time ago, worked in a restaurant right over there. But that is beside the point. So let's zoom back out and look at the highway again on a more regional level. To give you an idea of what Round Rock might look like today were it not for I-35, or at least a fair approximation of what it might have turned out like, let me take you to Taylor, Texas. Taylor is important to the story of Round Rock and to my understanding of how Round Rock developed given the significance of I-35, because originally, and let me just mark it on the map so we can see it from above, originally I-35 was intended to connect San Antonio through Austin through Taylor all the way to Dallas, continuing through Waco to Dallas. So it would have essentially bypassed Round Rock and Georgetown and a number of other small communities in this area. This would have been the case had the people of Taylor, or at least a considerable number of them, not fought against the highway coming through. This is because they worried about land being taken from agriculture and other uses, and noise and other concerns. I mean, you have to consider, I suppose, at the time, there weren't really any roads or highways of this nature. I mean, we already looked at how large and imposing it is, so it's hard to imagine that a road like that crossing through farmland. Yet there are certainly parts of Texas where it's just that. It's I-35 crossing over large sections of farmland. As you can see, most of the area around Taylor, except for the city proper itself, which is relatively small, is still in use as agricultural land or as grazing pasture. If I remember correctly, a lot of it is corn and um, grasses for livestock and other monocultured crops. Um, so this is just kind of an idea, or at least what I think would have happened in Round Rock had the interstate not passed through. Eventually, the interstate became a primary driver in the economy. It allowed Round Rock to grow. Um, so I think it's important to keep in mind what could have been were it not for the interstate, and understanding the impacts of this massive scale public works project. But enough time looking at Taylor. Let's go back to Round Rock. Given Round Rock's proximity to Austin, as I pointed out in the previous video, the interstate allowed for people to get into town being Austin, from Round Rock and the other surrounding communities fairly quickly. Without it, I can't imagine having to get there today. There are some roundabout ways of getting there, such as 183, which runs along here. Um, None of these roads would have existed at the time. So you would have been dealing with a lot of very small and often highly congested roads were it not for the interstate. Well, and certainly wasn't at the time, but a number of people, at least as I recall, and actually, now that I think about it, even in my own family, um, would live in Round Rock and work in Austin. My father was working at two different locations at the time, both in Round Rock and at an office. He had an office in Austin as well, and so he would split his time between the two. So you had large residential developments made possible by I-35 for these people who were working in Austin but living outside of it. So without I-35, Round Rock would probably have, I wouldn't say stagnated, but it wouldn't have grown at the considerable rate that it did um, in the early 90s and certainly into the 2000s. This was further increased by the location of Dell Computer Corporation in Round Rock. And I can remember those times when Dell was expanding. It was incredible. Houses were popping up. Oh, there it is. This would be the center for Dell Computer. So what has the highway meant for Round Rock? I think that without something of that scale, I mean specifically something of that nature being transportation, and in America, specifically in Texas, I can tell you, conceiving of anything other than a highway to do such things is blasphemous. That Round Rock wouldn't have developed in the way it did. I drive through, or rather, I've driven through parts of rural Texas for a number of years, and I can see how without easy access and immediate access to Austin or a city of that size, or even a community of that size, it doesn't necessarily have to be as concentrated as Austin is, those cities or towns don't grow at the rate and certainly on the scale that Round Rock has. I mean, the ease of access allowed for the development of this atmosphere of a bedroom community where people would work in Austin and live in Round Rock. Certainly people still do that, even though Round Rock has grown so much. There's still a considerable portion of the population that certainly works in Austin. I'm sitting here and it's challenging to even conceive of what Round Rock would be like without I-35. It certainly has come with problems. Round Rock was essentially divided by I-35. What used to be the Old Town Center, or Old Round Rock, is separated from where most of the rest of Round Rock proper is. The public library is on the opposite side of that massive highway from the high school, and I think all but one of the high schools, there are four, well no, now there are five in Round Rock, to show you how much it's grown. So accessing things like that were difficult for students. So it's certainly not without its bane, but I can't imagine growing up. But I think that the effect was overall positive if you view economic growth as being a purely positive thing, though I suppose that is a double-edged sword in and of itself. To lighten the mood after a somewhat, I suppose, dreary and dry video, I thought I would relate a fun story, one of my favorites in fact, about the history of Round Rock. One of the most notable people to have been born in Round Rock, though I suppose there is a bit of dispute over if he was actually from Round Rock, was the female impersonator, what we call a drag queen today, Barbette, who performed all throughout the US on the vaudeville circuit and throughout Europe, and whose life went on to inspire a movie, which later became a play, and then a musical, and then back into a movie starring Julie Andrews, that being, of course, Victor Victoria. I'll include a link below in the description box if you want to read a bit more about him. He had a fascinating career, though it did end rather sadly. So if you're looking for something fun to read, check it out. Next time we'll be looking at suburbanization, which I suppose may be even more dreary, but I think it's a very important issue to Round Rock, both as it developed and as it exists today and where it's going from here. So I'll see you then.